But, Rugrats, one of the categories was the babies misunderstand something in the adult world, like they go to a location they misunderstand, or they think someone's a villain who's not. Like the guy who comes to fix the pilot light, they think it's a pirate.
Right.
Yeah, and I wrote an episode where they go to an aquarium and they look out the window and they see fish, and holy crap, we're underwater. We sunk.
All right, this is a bonus episode of the Story Series podcast brought to you in partnership with the Pitch Docs, an online platform for entertainment professionals founded by Shimmer and Shine creator Farnaz Esnashiri. It's a service that pairs first-time show creators with seasoned veterans like today's guest, Scott Gray. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Nice to be here.
It's great to meet you. I'm super excited to talk to you. So for those who don't know, why don't we just start with like a brief professional introduction, like who you are and a couple of the projects that you've worked on?
I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I wrote from the time I was a little kid, won essay contests and spelling bees and all that cliche kind of stuff. And then, I moved out here in 95. I had gotten an agent in Phoenix through a friend, Adam Beechin, who's out here and a writer as well.
Oh, yeah.
Still, yeah.
I know Adam well. And
yeah. Adam and I went to high school together. So,
okay, cool.
And so he hooked me up with an agent in upstate New York who I had when I came out, and her star client was on Rugrats, was a staff writer on Rugrats. So that got my foot in the door. I pitched them 40 log lines, and they didn't.
40?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I went insane.
How, when you pitched them 40 log lines, how experienced were you as a writer?
Not very. No, I had no credits.
But you just had the mind of like, I got 40.
Yeah, well, I wrote sketches in college. Like I started out doing sketch comedy every week. It was like an SNL type show. It's called The Far Side. It's still around. I'll plug it. They're some of my best friends still, and that really got me used to the rhythm of writing for dialogue, and like you live or die on stage. If people laugh or not, literally. So
yeah, you got to be really quick and on your feet to.
Yeah.
Huh.
So that was kind of like my training, and yeah, so I came out here and I pitched 40 ideas. They were only one sentence each, and they took none of them. But they were like, this kid has moxie. So they handed me an idea, and that was my first Rugrats script, and I was on staff at Rugrats. It took a year and a half, I think, but I ended up on staff. That was the first show I was staffed on. And I was so young and dumb. I was like, I'd meet Debbie Reynolds like in the studio. I'd be like, oh, hey, Debbie Reynolds,
Wow.
It's a normal day at work, all the stars on Rugrats. And it was like the number one cartoon at the time. So, and I got to do a lot of the ancillary projects. I wrote the video games, a lot of them. And, I wrote a national comic strip for a while, and I grew up on like the Peanuts comic strip. So that was a dream. So it was an amazing first experience. And I followed that showrunner around. His name is Rick Gittleson, and he was my mentor into the business. He's semi-retired now. He always had a background doing other stuff. He's a very smart man. It's funny in this business, I'm sure you know it, like people that work for you, you end up working for pretty much all the time. It always switches back and forth.
Yes, that's happened. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or people that, they're in between jobs and they're like, hey, do you have a freelance script? Or hey, do you have this? And now I want to go back for a second. In your experience, early on, you submitted 40 log lines. It didn't take a single one. Every writer knows you're going to hear no throughout your career, not just in the beginning. Sometimes it feels like you're always breaking in, just at different levels. So in your experience, what mindset is most helpful when you hear the word no?
Kind of my advice to get through the tough times is I think to do this career, you got to love it. Like you got to really want to write. Like I always was the kid who analyzed stories. I'd make fun of TV commercials and rewrite them on the fly, And I grew up on sitcoms. I watched Dick Van Dyke. I Love Lucy. I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched. I can remember the whole lineup.
Bring me back to that moment, like where you feel like you finally broke into the industry. Was that with Rugrats? Where you finally felt like you've arrived?
That was my first staff job, but like the first thing I sold was. And I was doing video editing. I started out as an AV geek in Arizona for hotels, like in Scottsdale. So I'd run like videos and slides for rich businessmen who, in their spare time, shot each other with squirt guns. And I'd videotape that. So, but long story short, I had a regular job for like 5 years, and the first thing I sold though was I was still working at my video editing job, and I wrote a Pinky in the Brain spec when I was in Arizona still. And it got into the hands, my agent at the time, Sue Giordano at the Hudson Agency. She's still around and she's great. She got it into the hands of a guy at Disney named Jim Bates. And he brought me in and had me pitch to, it was the 101 Dalmatians. I'm dating myself now. TV series.
No, this is great.
It was a Buster Keaton project.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It was a 101 Dalmatians TV series, and I pitched 4 ideas. And they were at the end of the season, and I was this new writer. I had no credits, and so they were like, I think they delayed meeting me like 4 times. It was just it was a phone pitch.
Yeah.
So anyway, I took the call. I did the pitch, and she loved 4 of the ideas. They bought 4 of my ideas, which is kind of astounding. Looking back, that's pretty rare. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that was kind of when I knew. I was so nervous about that call. I practiced it for like weeks, and then after that call, I was like, wow, I guess I have good ideas, And so that was really validating.
Wow.
The bad news about that was I sold them 4 ideas, and Disney, you know this well too. Like they have big staffs, and they still do. And a lot of times, it's hard to get things through at Disney. Sometimes there can be a lot of note givers, and so they go through a lot of ideas. And I think they were at the end of their season, and they just needed ideas. So for their staff writers who had a certain amount of scripts they have to write, as well know.
Yeah.
You're contracted to write like 4 or 5 scripts a season or whatever it is. And I think some of their staff writers hadn't written that much. So they took my ideas and just kind of developed them internally. Like I did not write those scripts. Like I sold the premises, and that was really disappointing to me, honestly. So it was a good lesson in that too. It hasn't happened to me since. But yeah, it was kind of bittersweet. But then after that, I sold the premise to Jungle Cubs, which another Disney show. And then the first script I wrote was for Rugrats. So
wow.
Yeah.
So it was a journey in and of itself to get that first script, even after having sold a few premises, a few ideas.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are some common mistakes that you see first time or aspiring show creators make, or maybe some mistakes that you made early on when you were pitching?
I feel like there's some writers that take notes too personally. I feel like there's some writers that will push, and this has taken, experience for me to know the difference. There's some notes that you can just do and it won't change a lot. And that's fine. You want to give the note givers as many notes as you can, really. You want to err on the side of taking notes, I feel like, because I think everybody's just trying to do their best and do their job. So, I think you need to pick your hills to die on when it comes to notes.
It's well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to stop coming. So you have to find out the best way to deal with them. You give the network this one, maybe you push back on this one.
Yeah. There's been very few times in my career where I've stuck by a note, and it's to defend a writer in the show idea, where I felt like a note really just kind of killed the idea. And, you do that at the risk, more and more at the risk of your own job, I feel like, because, I feel like writers are more and more disposable these days in some ways, and executives and producers have all the power, and showrunners don't get to choose a lot of their own writers these days. And anyway, so again, that's why it's important to choose your battles. And I have a good friend that's a producer, and I can remember one time it got tense with him. I've known him for 10 years, but I pushed back on one thing. But I was like, I really believe in what I'm saying, and I pushed and lost. But like, you pick those instances rarely. And some people aren't good at that, and they take things personally, and that's not good. And the other thing I learned early on was to not get too attached to any of my jokes. So,
and for those, I think I know where you're going with that, but why?
Yeah, because, my friend Rick, when I worked on Rugrats, he was my boss. And I'd write scripts, and I'd be like, these are my top 5 jokes in the script. Don't cut any of these jokes.
I love that. These are my top 5.
I seriously was like that. And of course, he had to cut whatever, needed to be cut.
Yeah. He might have even liked the jokes. I mean, every writer knows, or you have to sometimes cut what you love because you have to make time, or because we need to make room for that story point in the previous scene. So something's got to go. And right. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. He liked the jokes, or sometimes he didn't, but it was never really like, it was a necessary reason. Like, it always made sense. So,
right.
Yeah.
These are my top 5 jokes in the script. I love that. I might do that. That's kind of fun. I remember I was on a show, and sometimes, when you're working for a head writer, you don't always know why things get cut. Sometimes maybe they didn't like something, or they liked it, but you just have to make time. You have to make the length of the script. And so there was like some stupid little joke that I spent like a season trying to get in. And then the second season I got it in, and the creator was like, oh yeah, that's funny. And I was like, oh, he liked it. This whole time, he just probably wasn't aware that he was, cutting it or what. Or sometimes it's just the time someone hears something, they change their opinion on it. But yeah,
Yeah.
if a joke gets cut, you could always bring it back in a future draft or a future or another show, right?
Oh, totally. I've done that too.
Yeah, you could.
I'm with you. Yeah, and sometimes you pitch exactly the same joke again, and they'll be like, "This is great." So it's just a bad day the first time or whatever.
Yeah,
So
that's true. You have your own bank of material that you could absolutely.
the showrunner on Rugrats at the time, she had a running joke which was fun. Like she put pants in every episode. The word pants. So if you look at that entire season, I think there was 2. But there's someone says pants in every episode. Yeah.
I love that.
Because she thought that was the funniest word there was, and it is a funny word.
It is a funny word.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're stuck? What are some habits that you've kind of grown to incorporate?
I mean, I'm lucky. I've never had writer's block per se. Knock on wood, right here. But that's because I've always been lucky that I come up with a lot of ideas. Like the Rugrats example. Like I'm kind of the guy that is able to generate ideas, and the way I've done it mostly is like I read the Bible, the show Bible a lot. This is what I did with Rugrats. I had no idea about the show. I'm like, I was angelic. I was like, I don't want to write for this dumb baby show. And then I actually watched it, and I'm like, oh, this is a really good show. So I watched like 20 episodes. I read as many scripts as they could give me. I read the Bible several times. I go through, and they reject a lot of those ideas because they were similar to ideas they already had, which I didn't even know about, some of them. So, but that's the best way to do it, based on character. Go through the story, the Bible, and see, Tommy, what is Tommy like? What does he dislike? What's his biggest fear? Like start with these character angles and then design a story around them. That's what I did. And Rugrats, I know people who break down shows into categories. You look at all the episodes they produced and, the episode log lines and try to reverse engineer something that fits that too. You can do this with any show. But, Rugrats, one of the categories was the babies misunderstand something in the adult world, like they go to a location they misunderstand, or they think someone's a villain who's not. Like the guy who comes to fix the pilot light, they think it's a pirate.
Right.
Yeah. And I wrote an episode where they go to an aquarium and they look out the window and they see fish and like, holy crap, we're underwater. We sunk. And the aquarium's shaped like a boat. That's the theme. So they think they're in a sunken boat. So, and that was just me in an aquarium thinking, if I were a baby, and I looked out a window and saw fish, we're underwater, So,
yes.
So like going through the Bible, and then, the other random thing that I've done a few times is like you can flip through a magazine and just look at pictures and just like serendipitous idea generation. Like you might see a picture of a mountain and be like, oh, what if I set this story on a mountain? Like what would that do? And that's actually worked for me a couple times. So
what do you think it is about those images in magazines? Are they telling a story?
I mean, they're good images. Yeah. I mean, it's more about getting out of your head, I think, because sometimes you can just work so hard and try to crack something so hard that you get stuck, And I will take a walk too, but I think that's a big part of it. Is just like distracting yourself almost and giving yourself space for something else to come in. And so that's what a magazine is too, partially. It's just kind of like a break. But
that's true. Sometimes when you could be, and I'm guilty of this, you get to the point of diminishing returns when you're in your own script, but something's not quite right. And you just find yourself, you're highlighting, unhighlighting. You're like, okay, I need to stop because I'm not doing anything. But if you read other scripts of the show, sometimes something will come to you when you're not trying, but you just like you're saying you're active creatively, but in a different way. I'm not thinking about this thing anymore. I'm looking at a magazine of images and whatever, but then something can come to you. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And actually whenever I write a script, I always try to not turn it in on the day I finish it. I try to give it a read the next morning, because I need that distance, and that really helps. And I also will always read a script through aloud. That is really helpful to me. So
reading it out loud.
Yeah, because we're in a vocal medium, it's not like print. So I always do that. I did it last night with a script I'm working on, and it always helps me find cuts because I'm like, this phrase sounds weird when I say it. And sometimes it'll give me like big cuts, so that's super helpful to me. Yeah.
I really love that. And it's weird that it's never occurred to me to do that on my own, because I'm always, I'm reading in my head. But we have the table read. We just did a table read yesterday on the show I'm on. And of course, that's when we all get together and read it out loud. But by then everybody's doing a part and it's already at the polish stage. Right. You're talking about when you're just writing the first draft on your own. That's great advice. It is a vocal medium, right? It's not.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I sound crazy, you know. You look
No,
like a
that's
crazy
really
person
good.
when you're talking to yourself. But yeah,
Yeah, that's great. What do you see as the biggest misconception about what it takes to pitch a successful show?
I think the most helpful thing is to make sure you have a cohesive full story, like with a beginning, a middle, and an end that builds and has a theme. You know, it sounds so basic, but a lot of the times you get an idea and it's like half an idea. It's like this could happen. You know, what if a gorilla turned giant? And you're like, that's great, but you know, where does it go? How do we stop it? You know, so I think that's the hardest kind of idea to do, but that's the ones that you really glom onto is where you can hear two or three sentences and just like it's got an organic beginning, middle, and end, you know? And that's what you want in a story.
What are you most proud of in your career? Is there a moment that you look back on that still brings you joy?
There's a couple. Can I say a couple?
Please.
Can I have 2 moments of joy or 3?
Yes.
Is it limited?
One moment of
One
joy.
moment of joy. Yeah. Your setup here is great, by the way. I love the mic. I feel like I'm on Howard Stern. So,
Okay,
yeah. So yeah, I mean, selling those first ideas was amazing. It was such a relief. I was like, I mean, I have that check framed still.
That's
so
cool.
that was great. I remember the first time that I was like mass produced in a store was also, I wrote a Rugrats video game and I walked into like Target, I think, and there was a big display just of that video game. And I was like, wow, I wrote that. Who paid me? Who was dumb enough to pay me to write this? So that was really cool. And then I was lucky enough to win an Emmy for Rugrats. So it was my first nomination, and I've been nominated 4 times since, and I've lost. So
Hey, that doesn't matter. That's awesome.
yeah, no, I'm
That's
super
great.
grateful. I got it out of the way right away.
Where's that Emmy now? I'm so curious.
Oh, it's
Where
on
do
my
you keep it?
desk.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And that was like a true moment of joy, like just hearing your name, the name of the show. Like I fist pumped, and I never fist pump, so I'm not a fist pumper guy. But I was like, woo! So
I think that's cool. You do have to take those moments of celebration and like you framed your first check. You know, I framed the cover of my first script over there on a show called Stretch Armstrong.
That's
you know,
awesome.
and it's like because you hear it's ups and downs, like you're saying. You hear no a lot, but there are moments that are worth celebrating, and it's nice to keep those front of mind sometimes because it's easy to dismiss and just focus on thing that's driving you nuts or you're in between jobs, whatever. But it's nice to celebrate that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
important, right? Best piece of advice you've ever received.
I mean, you know, keep going. I think is the main thing that's helped me. You know, after Rugrats, I've written a book about this on Amazon. I'll plug myself. It's self-published, but you know, after Rugrats ended, I couldn't get a job to save my life. So I ended up being a courier for like 3 months, and I literally delivered packages. I got an agent. I won Scriptapalooza right around that time when Rugrats ended. I met with Steve Levitan. Didn't go anywhere, but I pitched a show he was on called Oliver Bean.
I was going to say, where do I know his name from?
He created a Modern Family. So,
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
and he was a great guy. He actually, and he before that he'd been on Cheers and I think Cheers and Wings, and he had tons of credit. Frasier, I believe. Anyway, he asked me about the Rugrats writing room, so he was like just super nice. But then, like I said, after that, I was a courier, and I delivered. This is where I was going. I met with Steve Levitan, and he ended up getting me an agent at CAA. So I was with CAA as a client, but I also ended up delivering packages to CAA as a courier during that time. So it's Hollywood in a nutshell.
Sometimes that second job is harder than the first, right?
Yeah.
You know, you were staffed on Rugrats, which was your first like kind of full-time job. You had sold ideas before, but that was your first full-time, right?
Yep.
And then that ends, and the second job, people don't always talk about, but like that could be harder.
Yep,
right?
I hear that a lot. And it
Yeah.
was for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So, but I kept going, you know, and that's, you know, I continued writing. It was only 3 months, but it felt like it was, you know, very, very close to the worst 3 months of my life just because of the high versus the low. But,
Yeah, and you don't know how long it's going to be either. You know,
Yeah.
it's 3 months looking back, but looking forward, you're like, is this it?
yeah. Is it over?
Yeah.
So, you know, keep going, don't give up. And then write what you know, for aspiring writers, I always say, this is how I got into the business, have at least 2 great samples, honestly. Like, and that's what happened when I won Scriptapalooza. I run it, again, I'm dating myself, with a Malcolm in the Middle. And by the way, write a lot of samples, because when I first came to town, what got me the work at Disney was a Frasier and a Seinfeld. And they weren't looking at kid stuff. The Rugrats people, they liked sitcoms.
Well, that's a question. Just on that note for a second, a lot of writers ask what kind of sample they should have. If you want to get on a preschool show, because there's a lot of work in preschool animation, do executives and head writers only want to read preschool samples? And I think it's different from person to person, but I say not always.
Yeah, agreed. It varies, like person to person even. Like, I mean, preschool is its own animal, as you know, like it's a very different kind of writing. Like I always say preschool writing is harder than writing. I love 2.5 Men, but I think preschool writing is harder because 2.5 Men is a half hour of sex jokes and innuendos and insults,
Right.
They're hilarious, but like you can't do any of that in a kid's show. You got your humor has to come from stuff that cannot be imitated by children, that is not mean, that uses small words, that there's no insults. That's got to be positive humor.
Yeah.
So
Right. And Rugrats was not preschool. So there was that,
Yeah.
it was a little older. And so, but the fact that they were looking for sitcom type spec scripts from writers, I think is fascinating. Because you think of that against the show, you're like, oh yeah, I see that now.
yeah, well, Rugrats definitely had insults and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Angelica is
Rugrats,
like,
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
but yeah, I think these days it varies, and it varies. Try to have something in the genre you're trying to get into. Try to get into the genre that you want to get into the most first, because you will get stereotyped. Honestly, yeah, you're
Yeah.
nodding.
Yeah.
Like, you will get stereotyped no matter what. I've written a wide range of stuff, but mostly it's preschool, so it's hard for people to look at me. They look at your recent stuff, and like, and more and more, it's getting people are scared of losing their jobs, so execs are only hiring people who fit exactly the box of the show they're in. So,
Right.
so yeah, write what you want to do the most first. Have a great specs sample of that genre of show. Have an original idea, series that you've spec to, because that will showcase your voice. And when I met with Steve Levitan, like I had a Friends and a Malcolm in the Middle at that point. Malcolm in the Middle won Scriptapalooza, the sitcom thing, and but even Steve Levitan, after winning, like it's a pretty major festival, he was like, "What else you got?" And I'm like, "Oh crap!" But thankfully, I had a Friends. I'm like, "Oh, I've got this Friends," and so they like that, and so you're always going to get that question. What else do you have?
That's a great lesson. You in this contest gets you this attention, and then it's like, so what else do you have? Like
Yeah.
that's going to come, at some point in the conversation, and then you're like, oh,
Right.
But in your case, you were prepared.
Yeah, thankfully I was prepared. And so a couple great scripts. Ideally, one is original, one is a spec of the thing you want to get into. And I will say the danger with specs is, it showcases you. It's all you. So there's no notes involved. There's no constraints of shows, dictates or anything. So that spec better be great, because you got no excuse for it not being great.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's the hardest thing. I've showrun a lot, and I get specs from writers. And like you said, it all depends on the showrunner, because I'd rather see originals and I'd rather see sitcoms rather than preschool. Like I want to know you can do preschool, but my biggest thing is I want to know that you can be funny and you can write crisply, and tightly. That's like I want to hear the rhythm in it. So, and that comes from like sketch writing for me. Like that's still like so the pure comedy. And that's the hardest thing to do in an original spec. So I'm very hard on original specs in my mind. So
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're brought together over the pitch talks, but that's what people coming to you will want from you.
Right.
Right. It's just that eye, that expertise, and just tell me what I need to know. Because looking back when I was first starting out as a writer, obviously honest feedback hurt the most in that little moment, because of course, you're so delicate, at least I was on the inside, because you have no experience, you want validation. But looking back, that was what I needed to grow.
Yeah.
Worst piece of advice you've ever received?
I mean, I think it's always bad to write something that you think someone will want to read. Like write something that you want to write and that you're passionate about and that you believe in. Like,
Yes. People sometimes they chase
Yeah.
like what they think someone, or where they think the industry's going, and you're like, your personal take is don't do that.
Yeah. And again, it's all about rejection. Like you may get rejected. Write something that you want to write and you're interested in. 20 people may hate it and say it's stupid, but you find that one person who shares your sensibilities and is like, I love this. You're in, head write this show for me. So
Yeah. You only need one yes every so often.
Right.
If they all said yes at the same time, that's also a good problem, but you can't do all those anyway. Before we wrap up, what's the best way for someone on the pitch docs to start a conversation with you? Like, what should they already know, or what should they have?
Right. Well, I'm happy to be part of it, and Farna's is great. So I worked on Shimmer and Shine years ago.
Yeah.
And I didn't meet her then, but we've connected since, obviously. So I'm proud to be a part of it, and it's a lot of great people. And yeah, I think people can come in at any level, but I think the most helpful thing to come in with is an idea of what genre you want to get into the most of writing. What your age range is, what your specialty is. Is it action comedy? Are you more like emotional, social based? Is it softer stories? Kind of get know where your wheelhouse is and what you would love to write the most. That's helpful. And if you have ideas, if you have an original piece of work, that's great. Like that's the simplest thing to take and work with. But yeah, I think no matter what level, just have an idea of what their personal goal is going in.
Well, to learn more about the pitch docs and how they help creators develop winning pitches, visit thepitchdocs.com or on Instagram at thepitchdocs, where you'll find all kinds of amazing professionals to connect with, like today's guest, Scott. This was such a pleasure, man. I thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was awesome. Thanks, Brandon.
Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If something in this episode moved you or even made you pause for a second, please consider following the show, leaving a review, and signing up for the weekly newsletter at storyseriesPodcast.com. That's where I share my personal takeaways from each episode, what stuck with me and why, one story at a time. See you in the next one.